Reny Jose, a name that still echoes with one unanswered question. Where did he go? More than a decade later, both Florida and Texas still feel the weight of his disappearance. Reny wasn't just any college student. At 21 years old, he was a mechanical engineering senior at Rice University, carrying a perfect 4.0 GPA. He already had business suits lined up for interviews, polished resume, and his own business cards. He was focused, driven, not the type to party, not the type to get reckless. He was the kind of student professors remembered by name. But all of that changed in March 2014. Reny joined 22 other students on a spring break trip from Houston to Panama City Beach, Florida, a place known for its wild parties and crowded shores. For Reny, it was supposed to be nothing more than a short break before returning to classes and career plans. The group arrived on March 1st. Nothing seemed unusual, no signs of trouble yet. But on the night of March 3rd, something went wrong. At some point during the evening, Reny's friends lost track of him. They searched briefly, assumed he'd return on his own, and went back to the rental house. But the next morning, he was still missing. And that's when this trip turned into something far more chilling. The group searched again, this time with a growing sense of dread. Then, just outside the rental home, they made a disturbing discovery. Reny's clothes, bundled up, stuffed in a trash can. Everything he had been wearing the night before. Just after 11 a.m. on March 4th, they finally called the police. Investigators moved quickly, and what they found only deepened the mystery. Down on Panama City Beach, more of Reny's clothing appeared. But there was something deeply unsettling about this find. The entire beach had been cleaned just 5 hours earlier. Cleanup workers said they didn't see those clothes before, meaning someone had to have placed them there afterward. Was that person Reny, or someone else? The more investigators looked, the stranger the case became. One of the students told police that Reny had been under the influence of a psychedelic drug the night before he vanished. But for anyone who knew him, this made no sense. Reny didn't party. He didn't experiment with substances. Friends said it was completely out of character, almost impossible to believe. So the question formed quickly. If Reny was on a hallucinogenic drug, did he truly take it willingly? Detectives searched the rental house but found nothing suspicious. When they questioned the students, things got even murkier. Everyone who claimed to see Reny last pointed in a different direction. North, south, toward the beach. Away from it, no two stories matched. And even stranger, after Reny vanished, nearly every student in the group stayed silent. No updates, no interviews, no new information, just silence. Why? Were they scared? Confused? Or was someone hiding something? To this day, no one knows. There were no confirmed sightings, no evidence of where he went, no body, no answers, just a trail that ends with a pile of clothes, inconsistent stories, and a bright young man who vanished without explanation. As of today, Reny Jose is still missing. His family still waits. The communities who knew him still wonder. And the question that began in 2014 continues to haunt us. Where is Reny Jose? And what really happened that night in Panama City Beach? There's always some risk involved when traveling to a foreign country, but most people expect to return home refreshed after a holiday, without any fear that their life could end while exploring an unfamiliar place. Unfortunately, this was not the case for 28-year-old Regan Kelly, whose mysterious death in Thailand is still under investigation. Regan was from Sheldon in London, England, where he worked as a building supervisor. He had traveled to Thailand for a month-long holiday when he suddenly disappeared under strange and unexplained circumstances. Regan had traveled abroad many times before, and according to his friends and family, he was always friendly, social, and quick to make new connections. But shortly after checking into the Mad Monkey Hostel on Phuket Island, he vanished, and has not been found alive since. What deeply concerns both his family and authorities is the fact that Regan was seen running out of a bar on the island on the night of January 3rd. This was later confirmed through CCTV footage. Witnesses reported that Regan had been with an unknown man that night, believed to be a fellow tourist whom he had never met before. Other hostel guests said the two men were seen talking inside the hostel earlier that night, though the man was not staying there. It's assumed they met elsewhere, then went to the bar together for drinks. They had been in the bar for several hours when an argument suddenly erupted. The CCTV footage has no audio, but their body language clearly shows a heated discussion. Regan's family said they could see him becoming visibly more upset as the argument escalated, until he suddenly took off, running out of the bar. He was then seen heading toward Patong Beach, with the unidentified man chasing after him. CCTV cameras at the beach captured Regan running past, and around 15 seconds later, the second man appeared, running after him for reasons still unknown. The next day, Regan's family received the devastating news that he had been found deceased in the ocean by a swimming instructor, without any clothing. His sister Lori and their father flew to Thailand to help with the investigation, but it has since gone cold. Authorities still have no explanation for what led to Regan's death. It remains unclear what the argument was about. Some believe Regan may have accidentally ended up in the water and couldn't swim back, but his family insists that something feels wrong. They strongly suspect foul play, a theory supported by the fact that the unidentified man has never come forward to clear his name. When Regan ran out of the bar, he was wearing a Mad Monkey t-shirt, shorts, a baseball-style hat, and a crossbody backpack containing his phone and other belongings. None of his clothes or possessions have been found. The unknown man is described as having a stocky build. At the time of the chase, he was seen wearing shorts and a white t-shirt. Despite multiple public appeals, he has never been identified or located. In late April of 2021, the quiet, windswept community of Babb, Montana, tucked deep inside the Blackfeet Indian Reservation, became the center of a mystery that still haunts the people who live there. A mystery involving a young father, a beloved son, and a vanishing so sudden, so disturbing, that for many, it feels less like a disappearance and more like a wound that refuses to close. His name was Leo James Wagner. He was 26 years old, and to this day, no one knows what happened to him. Leo wasn't a drifter. He wasn't running from anything. He was the kind of person who walked into a room and lifted everyone else's spirits before touching his own. His father, Bell Wagner, described him as the family jokester, someone who never missed a chance to crack a joke, tease a sibling, or turn a bad day into a manageable one. He loved boxing, working outdoors, and being a father to his 5 young children. To the Blackfeet community, Leo wasn't just another young man. He was family. He was tradition. He was part of the land itself. And that's why the community broke when he went missing. On April 27, 2021, Blackfeet law enforcement received an unusual call. Someone reported seeing a man walking near the shores of St. Mary Lake, looking possibly intoxicated. Officers searched the shoreline, but found nothing. A second call came in shortly after. A man with an injured arm was seen walking along West Shore Road. Again, officers arrived. Again, they found nothing. It wasn't until later, much later, that these sightings were believed to be Leo. At the time, he was wearing a blue-plaid Western-style shirt, a white undershirt, and jeans. 2 days later, when he never returned home and never contacted his family, something completely out of character, he was officially reported missing. When the search began, it wasn't small. It was massive. Local, tribal, and federal agencies spread across the St. Mary and Babb areas using helicopters, ATVs, horses, boats, divers, and cadaver dogs. The goal was simple: find Leo, any piece of him, any sign. No one expected what came next. On May 2nd, officers were called to a cabin near Big Nose Bay after a reported burglary. Inside the cabin, investigators found something that made their blood run cold. Leo's clothing, his personal belongings, and blood. A lot of it. Blood that didn't belong to a stranger. Blood that didn't belong to a random intruder. Blood that matched the missing young father. Family members confirmed everything inside the cabin belonged to Leo. Authorities said the amount of blood indicated a serious, possibly life-threatening injury. From that moment on, the search area expanded outward into roughly 70 square miles of rugged, unforgiving terrain. Yet still, there was no Leo. As days stretched into weeks, hope began to fade. On May 8th, audio clips surfaced online from anonymous individuals who claimed to know what happened to Leo. The recordings spread fast across social media. But after investigating the claims, officers confirmed the recordings were false, misleading, and offered no real information. Another dead end. By mid-May, after almost 2 weeks of non-stop searching, officials made the heartbreaking decision to scale back the search. Patrols continued, but the large-scale operation was shut down. Months later, the case was taken up by the Bureau of Indian Affairs Missing and Murdered Unit, bringing federal scrutiny and resources. Still, no new leads, no arrests, no answers. The case of Leo James Wagner remained completely frozen in time. For Leo's family, the search never slowed down. His father spent weeks at St. Mary Lake, walking the shoreline, searching the woods, calling out his son's name into silence. His sister, Michaela, became one of the strongest voices demanding justice. She said their family literally fell apart after Leo vanished. They felt forgotten, ignored, left behind in a justice system that, historically, has failed Native families again and again. She said she believes investigators care. But, in her words, "My brother's case isn't their top priority." So the family searches themselves, whenever the weather allows, hoping that one day anything will help bring Leo home. Leo's case isn't isolated. Not in Montana. Not in Indian country. Native Americans make up only 6 to 7% of Montana's population, but they account for 1/3 of all missing persons cases in the state. Jurisdiction issues, lack of communication between agencies, and limited law enforcement resources create delays, confusion, and sometimes complete breakdowns in investigations. The Blackfeet Reservation spans 1.5 million acres. Yet, the tribal police force has only around 18 officers to cover it. Cases fall through cracks. Families feel abandoned. And people like Leo remain missing for years, sometimes forever. As of 2025, Leo Wagner's disappearance remains unsolved. No body has been recovered. No suspect has been named. And no clear theory has emerged explaining what happened in that cabin, or where Leo went afterward. But the case is still open, still active, still waiting for the one piece of truth that could finally break it wide open. Leo's story is deeply personal, but it represents a much larger crisis. A crisis of missing Indigenous people whose cases don't always get the attention, urgency, or justice they deserve. Leo was 26 years old when he vanished. Brown hair, brown eyes, 5 feet 8 inches, 165 pounds. A son, a brother, a father of 5, a young man whose laughter once filled every room he walked into. His family continues to search, continues to fight, continues to hope, because somewhere out there, someone knows what happened, and all it takes is one person, one moment of courage, to finally bring Leo home. Anyone with information is urged to contact Blackfeet tribal law enforcement at telephone receiver 406-338-4000. 2-year-old Myra Lewis was last seen on March 1, 2014, in Camden, Mississippi, between 10:30 and 11 a.m. by her mother, Erica. The toddler had been playing outside with her sister in front of their rural property on Mount Pilgrim Road when Erica left to go shopping. Before she left, Erica told the girls to go inside to be with their father, who was tending to the couple's newborn baby at the time, but it's unclear whether the two actually went indoors. Erica left, and their father, Gregory, did not notice Myra's disappearance until hours later. Some reports state that he believed she was with her mother. The search for the toddler began between 4 and 5 hours after she was last seen by Erica, who returned home around 3 p.m. to find Myra missing. Gregory searched first on his ATV and used the family dogs to attempt to locate her scent. Despite the dogs not being trained scent dogs, he tried, but his efforts proved fruitless, and police were contacted a short time later. Law enforcement brought their own trained scent dogs to the property to look for Myra, searching a 4-square-mile area around the home. No trace of the little girl was found. The following day, March 2nd, Madison County officials issued an Amber Alert to raise awareness about Myra's disappearance. The day after that, her case was reclassified as a child abduction, and several other law enforcement agencies joined the search. Despite increased manpower, no sign of Myra surfaced. On March 10th, the FBI offered a $20,000 reward for information leading to Myra's whereabouts. Few leads were generated, and 3 days later, divers searched the pond near the family home again. Still, no evidence was found. During the weeks following the disappearance, Jerica was arrested for violating her probation. She was accused of being a felon in possession of a firearm and of failing to pay court costs and supervision fees. She was arrested and held in jail, a move many criticized, considering the circumstances. Her husband claimed he was unaware of her previous conviction for welfare fraud. Myra's grandmother, Annuinette, held out hope for months that the little girl was still alive. She said, "Whoever got her, just send her back home. I love her. She was a good child. She was very obedient. She was smart. She's 2, but she has the mind of a 3 or 4-year-old. There have been no leads in Myra's case since she vanished. With so little information available, theories are limited. Online sleuths have suggested that because the family lived in such a rural area, someone present that day must know what really happened." Madison County Sheriff Randy Tucker appeared on the Investigation Homicide podcast earlier this year and shared a similar view. He stated that he believes someone on the property knows far more than they're admitting. He described Gregory Lewis as emotionless and said the family never kept in touch with law enforcement, which is unusual in missing child cases. He stated, "And I firmly believe to this very date that the people that were on the property that day know exactly what happened, know exactly where Myra is, and the circumstances surrounding her disappearance. Myra is still missing. She was 2 years old when she vanished from Camden, Mississippi, on March 1st, 2014. She is described as a black female with black hair and brown eyes. At the time of her disappearance, she was about 3 feet 1 inch tall, weighed 27 pounds, and was wearing white or khaki trousers, a turquoise sweater with a bear print, and pink tennis shoes. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children released an age-progressed image of what she might look like at age 10, though she would now be 13 years old. If you have any information about her disappearance, contact the Madison County Sheriff's Department at 601-859-2345 or the Jackson FBI at 601-948-5000. It was the summer of 1973, one of those turbulent, electric summers when music was loud, freedom felt infinite, and young love made the world seem a little less complicated. But on July 27, 1973, 2 Brooklyn teenagers, 16-year-old Mitchel Weiser and 15-year-old Bonita Bickwit, stepped onto the shoulder of State Route 97 in Narrowsburg, New York, and were never seen again. What began as a simple trip to one of the biggest concerts in American history would become one of New York's most haunting cold cases. A case that, even now, nearly 50 years later, refuses to give up its secrets. Mitchel and Bonnie were the kind of teens you'd expect to see at a massive 70s rock festival. Mitchel, bright, gentle, artistic, carried his camera everywhere, always searching for beauty. He'd named his dog after a Grateful Dead song. Bonnie was independent, thoughtful, and deeply compassionate, already wise beyond her 15 years. They met at John Dewey High School, a place where bright minds thrived, and their connection became immediate, intense, and unwavering. By the summer of '73, they'd been together for a year. Mitchel had tickets to the Summer Jam at Watkins Glen, a concert so huge it rivaled Woodstock. Hundreds of thousands of people were expected, a sea of music and freedom. When his friend couldn't go, he invited Bonnie, who desperately needed a break from her demanding babysitting job at Camp Wilmette. When the camp refused to give her time off, Bonnie quit on the spot. She returned home briefly while her parents were away, grabbed the $80 she'd been saving for a bike, and wrote a letter describing her longing for independence. words that would take on a chilling weight in the years to come. On July 26th, Mitchel traveled by bus to Narrowsburg to meet Bonnie. They spent the night at the camp before a staff member drove them into town the next morning. There, the couple stood beside the highway, sleeping bags slung over their shoulders, a cardboard sign that read Watkins Glen. It was a moment frozen in time. Two teenagers, full of hope, excited for an unforgettable weekend. No one knows what happened to them after that. They were never seen again. At first, their families believed the two might simply be enjoying an extended adventure. But when Mitchel didn't return home, his father and sister went straight to the camp, only to discover that neither teen had come back. Bonnie's family returned from vacation to find their daughter missing. They were notified by camp staff and immediately joined the frantic search. But police initially dismissed the case entirely. Because the couple had exchanged rings and talked about marriage, authorities assumed they had simply run away together. That assumption cost investigators days, weeks, maybe the truth itself. By the time law enforcement realized something was very wrong, any trail the teenagers may have left was long cold. Both families took on the investigation themselves. They printed flyers, contacted newspapers across the country, and followed every rumor, no matter how small. Sightings trickled in over the years. A report of the couple on a bus to New Hampshire. A Manhattan pharmacist who believed Bonnie had filled a prescription. And the most chilling lead of all. In 1987, 14 years after the teens vanished, Mitchel's father, now living in Arizona, received a collect call. The caller identified herself as Bonnie. He accepted the charges. But the moment the operator came back on the line, the caller hung up. The call was never traced. The voice was never confirmed. And the question still lingers. Was it really Bonnie? Or a cruel stranger? Time passed, but hope never fully died. Mitchel's family kept their phone number listed publicly for decades, even after moving states. Just in case he ever tried to find them. Both families aged without answers, grieving without closure, trapped in a nightmare that offered no evidence, no direction, and no resolution. Today, the disappearance of Mitchel Weiser and Bonita Bickwit stands as one of the oldest active missing teen cases in the United States. Their story echoes across generations, a reminder of how two young lives can slip away in a single moment and leave nothing behind but questions. Did they make it to the concert? Did they get into the wrong car? Were they victims of an accident? Or something far worse? After 50 years, the answers remain just beyond reach, locked away in the shadows of a warm July morning. Somewhere, the truth still exists. Someone somewhere knows what happened. And until that truth emerges, their families and the world remain haunted by the mystery of two teenagers who vanished on the road to summer freedom and never returned. The disappearance of Jerica Hamre remains one of Nebraska's most troubling and heartbreaking mysteries. A case marked by fear, confusion, and deep sorrow for the family she left behind. Jerica, who was 30 years old when she vanished from Lincoln, Nebraska, had lived a life filled with both joy and hardship. She was the mother of 3 daughters, though her parents had custody due to Jerica's personal struggles. Despite this arrangement, she remained devoted to her children and attended scheduled visitations, keeping a strong bond with them. Her parents described her as fun-loving, someone who cherished spending time with her girls and whose personality could brighten even the darkest of days. Jerica had moved to Lincoln from Wilcox in Kearney County in April, just 2 months before she disappeared. Her father, Craig Hamre, explained that Jerica had spent the last decade battling difficult circumstances, making choices that often placed her in unsafe environments and around people who did not support her well-being. According to him, these choices eventually caught up with her in a painful way. Yet even through challenges, Jerica's family remained hopeful for her future, believing she was capable of change and deserving of a stable, loving life. Just days before she vanished, Jerica faced a frightening ordeal. On the 22nd of June, she was assaulted by a man and 2 women, people she had been living with. She sustained severe bruising on her face and suffered a broken nose. In a video conversation with her friend Becky Burnett, Jerica expressed that her living situation had become unbearable and was not unfolding the way she expected. She reported the assault to police but chose not to press charges, possibly out of fear or uncertainty about what might follow. Jerica was last seen at her home near 35th and Huntington on the 25th of June. She failed to appear at work that day, which was unusual for her. When she missed a scheduled visit with her daughters on the 29th of June, her family's concern escalated. Jerica, known to be active on social media, suddenly stopped posting altogether. The silence was alarming. Months later, on the 22nd of October, investigators conducted a search of a property in Overton, Nebraska, near the Platte River by River Lodge Outfitters. Data from Jerica's phone suggested she had last been in the general area of Arapahoe, Holdridge, Overton, or Lexington. Despite the extensive search, no evidence was recovered. Her disappearance is considered suspicious, and investigators have stated they do have a suspect. However, no public updates have confirmed whether this lead has brought them closer to answers. Jerica's family believes that she is most likely deceased, a realization that has brought immense grief. Yet they find comfort in seeing her spirit reflected in her children. They have received tremendous support from the Brigham Home Foundation, which has organized searches and stood beside the family during their darkest days. Though Jerica would now be 31 years old, her family continues to hope for clarity, longing for the day when they finally learn what happened to their beloved daughter. The disappearance of Jessica Zrinsky remains one of the most unsettling and heartbreaking mysteries to emerge from New South Wales in recent years. Jessica, who was 30 years old, vanished in late November of 2022 after a series of sightings that now form the final known record of her movements. Her last hours, pieced together through scattered CCTV footage and eyewitness accounts, paint a troubling and incomplete picture. One investigators have spent years trying to understand. Despite extensive searches, widespread public appeals, and a significant reward, Jessica's fate remains unknown, leaving her family and community in a prolonged state of grief and uncertainty. Jessica was last seen on Monday, November 28, 2022. That evening, she was observed in the car park of the Greenfield Tavern on Mimosa Road in Greenfield Park, located in Sydney's southwest. CCTV footage shows her dressed in an orange singlet top, long black leggings, and flat shoes, carrying a cream-colored handbag. Approximately 10 minutes after she appeared on camera, Jessica entered a blue Holden Commodore. The man driving the vehicle was later identified and interviewed by detectives. His car was seized and examined thoroughly, but no significant evidence was found. Authorities have stated, however, that the man has not been cooperative, adding another layer of difficulty to the investigation. Later that night, at around 10:15 p.m., additional footage captured the Commodore traveling through Horsley Park. In the video, Jessica is seated in the passenger seat at a petrol station while the driver, wearing a gray shirt, black pants, and sneakers, fills the tank. He then walks inside to pay and returns with 2 bottles of Coke before the pair continue driving westward. This footage remains one of the clearest and most concerning glimpses of Jessica before she disappeared. The following morning, Tuesday, November 29th, at approximately 9 a.m., the blue Commodore was recorded again, this time at a petrol station in Mount Victoria, about 90 minutes west of Sydney. Jessica was once again visible in the passenger seat. This would become the last confirmed sighting of her. Investigators believe Jessica was still alive at this point before vanishing sometime afterward along the journey west. After days of silence, no phone calls, and no sign of Jessica, her family grew increasingly worried. When they were unable to reach her or determine her whereabouts, they contacted police on December 3rd, triggering a full-scale investigation. Strike Force Kita was formed to examine every detail surrounding her disappearance. Detectives began reconstructing the vehicle's suspected route, believing the Commodore continued west along the M4 motorway and the Great Western Highway, deeper into the Blue Mountains. While the precise route remains unclear, evidence strongly suggests that Jessica was somewhere in the region during the hours before she disappeared. Authorities carried out large-scale searches across remote and rugged bushland as part of their efforts. In May 2023, Police conducted a 3-day search of the Hampton State Forest, located roughly 115 kilometers west of Sydney. Specialist units, drones, and volunteers worked tirelessly, but no meaningful clues were uncovered. Later, investigators spent another 3 days searching the Jenolan State Forest, approximately 13 kilometers north of the well-known Jenolan Caves. These wilderness areas are vast and incredibly difficult to navigate, filled with steep slopes and thick vegetation, conditions that make search operations extremely challenging. Despite the extensive efforts, no trace of Jessica was found. Throughout the investigation, police continued to appeal for public assistance. In November 2023, authorities announced a $500,000 reward for information that could help solve the case or lead to Jessica's whereabouts. The hope was that someone somewhere might come forward with a crucial detail. To this day, no breakthrough has been made. Jessica Zrinsky is described as Caucasian in appearance, approximately 165 centimeters tall, thin build, blonde hair. She also has distinctive tattoos on her right index finger, her left wrist, the back of her neck. These identifying features remain central to the ongoing search. The disappearance of Jessica Zrinsky continues to weigh heavily on her loved ones and on the investigators dedicated to finding the truth. Despite CCTV analysis, interviews, forensic examinations, and broad search operations, the events that led to her disappearance remain unresolved. Jessica's case stands as a haunting reminder of how quickly someone can vanish, and how desperately families long for answers that never come. On the 18th of February 1975, a strange case began to unfold on a highway in Baldock, Hertford, England. Several drivers later reported that they had seen a woman hitchhiking along the A1 motorway after it was announced that she had lost her life that morning. Other motorists also came forward, saying they saw the same woman walking in the middle of that road at around 6:15 a.m., barefoot, before she was struck by a car. She was found deceased at the scene, but her identity remained unknown. When investigators processed the area, they discovered something unusual. The soles of her feet were relatively clean. This suggested that she had removed her shoes only moments earlier. Had she been barefoot for long, the soles would have been much dirtier. She carried no identification, no purse, and no personal belongings that could help determine who she was. As the investigation grew cold, she became known as the Baldock woman or the girl in the Afghan coat, due to her clothing. She was wearing a brown Afghan coat, a brown waistcoat, a blue Chelsea girl blouse, a white floral blouse, black jeans, a denim miniskirt, a lace scarf, tights. Authorities estimated she was between 18 and 25 years old. Police described her as having light-colored, shoulder-length hair, a slim build, hazel eyes, a pierced right ear, and a scar on her right leg. She also had a wart on her abdomen and one on her left leg. For the next 35 years, no new information surfaced. The driver who struck her was never identified and was wanted for fleeing the scene. Then, in 2010, a breakthrough came. After a forensic artist created a new sketch of the woman, David Liversedge contacted investigators. He believed he recognized her. He said he had picked her up on London's North Circular Road while she was hitchhiking in a thunderstorm back in 1972. He and his wife let her stay with them for 6 months before she left to attend Cambridge University, where she said she planned to study English. She told the couple she was a French student, and they remembered her name as Odile Ludic, though they weren't sure of the exact pronunciation. With this new lead, the charity Locate International reopened the investigation. In 2025, they found a newspaper article from November 1972 reporting that a 20-year-old French student named Odile Lowe had escaped a house fire at 143 Stern Street in Cambridge. The article also noted that she was studying English at the university. With this major connection uncovered, investigators are now asking anyone who may have known Odile to come forward so she can finally be formally identified. Those with information are urged to call 0300 102 1011. Karen and Spencer's disappearance remains one of the most troubling and emotional mysteries to emerge from the late 1980s, a case that continues to haunt her family and investigators decades later. Born on the 17th of January 1972, in Kenton, Kentucky, Karen grew up surrounded by a large and loving family. Her siblings remembered her as energetic and bright, someone who could illuminate any room she walked into. Her childhood, though marked by her parents' separation, remained anchored in love, especially after she moved to Miami Township, Ohio, to live with her father, Richard, and her devoted stepmother, Diane. Diane adored her deeply, referring to her lovingly as "my girl," recalling her as spirited, stubborn, but filled with heart. Like many teenagers, Karen faced challenges while growing up. She experimented with alcohol at an early age, and her father, deeply concerned for her future and well-being, placed her in an alcohol treatment program. Karen, frustrated by the decision, left the program and moved in with her older brother, Curtis, and his wife, Christy. Despite these struggles, Karen was moving forward in life. At 17, she was working as a waitress at Kingsmill Freshes in Mason, Ohio, and working hard in her senior year at Reading High School. She looked toward the future with excitement, counting down the days to graduation and her 18th birthday. Curtis and Christy were planning to move to Florida, and Karen eagerly anticipated joining them to begin a new chapter. However, everything changed on the night of the 29th of December, 1989. What should have been an ordinary evening became the starting point of an unexplained disappearance. Karen and Christy were out together, leaving Richard at home caring for Christy's baby. Karen, carrying only $7 in her wallet, drove Christy's black Buick Regal. At approximately 3 o'clock in the morning, while driving along I-275, Christy revealed devastating news. Karen would no longer be moving to Florida with them. The revelation shattered Karen, who had built her hopes around this plan. An argument broke out between them as they traveled between the Montgomery Road and Ohio 28 exits. Overcome with frustration and heartbreak, Karen pulled the Buick onto the shoulder and got out, walking north along the interstate in the freezing winter night. Moments later, a red 1982 Datsun B310 pulled up. A young man stepped out and asked if they needed help. Christy told him to leave, and according to her, he drove away. Christy then got into the driver's seat, drove off, and traveled about 3 miles before she reconsidered and turned around to find Karen. But when she returned, Karen had vanished. Christy drove to Richard's home, distraught and sobbing, initially telling him that Karen was at the apartment. Richard sensed something was wrong and called the apartment, and when no one answered, Christy admitted what had happened. Richard immediately contacted authorities, launching a desperate search that would turn into a lasting nightmare for the Spencer family. Police responded quickly, searching both sides of the interstate, scouring miles of roadway, woods, brush, and embankments. Days passed with no sign of Karen. Helicopters joined the search, but nothing. No clothing, no belongings, no trace was found. Nationwide alerts were issued. Media outlets shared her photo. Her mother and stepfather distributed flyers in Kentucky. Still, no meaningful leads emerged. Investigators examined Christy's Buick and found 2 saucer-sized bloodstains on the front seat. Shockingly, they dismissed them, claiming that if violence had occurred, the pattern would resemble spatter, not blotches. Because of this reasoning, they did not test the blood. Before this oversight could be corrected, the vehicle was repossessed and sold, eliminating any chance of recovering evidence. One of the only significant leads came from a woman walking her dogs near the interstate, who reported hearing a woman screaming around the same time Karen vanished. Police traced the red Datsun's owner, the same man who had approached Christy. His account contained inconsistencies. He seemed to know details about the argument between Karen and Christy, even though Christy insisted she never told him. He passed a polygraph test, but FBI specialists later stated they believed he manipulated it. He had allegedly cleaned his car twice that day, canceled its insurance, and could not explain what happened to the vehicle. Without physical evidence, investigators could not proceed with charges. Additional reports trickled in over the years, including witnesses who claimed to have seen Karen walking along the interstate and a truck driver who thought he saw a body being buried near Lake Isabella. None of these leads resulted in answers. 12 years later, the family received a chilling voicemail from an anonymous caller who claimed to know where Karen's body could be found near Renfro Valley, Kentucky. The caller was quickly identified. A man who admitted it was a cruel prank inspired by seeing a news segment about Karen. He served 45 days in jail, but the emotional damage to the family was immeasurable. Detective Bill Paul later stated he knew without doubt who was responsible, claiming the suspect had revealed information only the person responsible could know. But with no physical evidence to support charges, the case remained frozen in legal standstill. Karen's family, still grieving, still searching, has expressed forgiveness toward the individual believed responsible, yet they continue to plead for closure. In August of 1996, something shifted inside 33-year-old Marcia and Ryan. Something no one in her life could explain, and something she never lived long enough to clarify. Marcia was the kind of woman people described as anchored, reliable, smart, practical, the youngest of 5 children, raised in a close-knit family in Victoria, Australia. She lived a quiet, orderly life with her beloved dog, Ziggy, a loyal border collie mix who rarely left her side. But in the days before she vanished, the people closest to her noticed a change. Small at first, then deeply alarming. Marcia seemed afraid, not her usual cautious, thoughtful self, but paranoid, unsettled, and constantly looking over her shoulder. And though she tried to articulate her fear, the details never fully made sense. No one could have known that these small cracks in her composure were the beginning of one of Australia's most haunting cold cases, a mystery that remains unsolved nearly 3 decades later. On August 19th, Marcia left work early, telling her manager she felt unwell. It was unusual, but not enough to raise alarm. What her coworkers didn't know was that this was the same day she asked a new housemate to leave, a man named Stephen, who had only been living with her for a brief period. How long he actually stayed remains disputed. Marcia's family believed it was only a few days. Stephen later claimed it was a full month. But one thing was certain: Marcia was frightened of him. She told her mother she believed he was placing feathers and bones in her yard. An odd, unsettling detail that hinted at something deeper happening in her mind, or something frightening happening around her. Whatever the truth, something inside Marcia snapped that night. Only 15 minutes after her brother left her home, after comforting her for hours, Marcia called her parents in Queensland. Her voice was firm and decided. She was driving to stay with them, a 1,200-mile journey, alone, in the middle of the night. This wasn't spontaneous. This was a flight. Before heading north, Marcia made an inexplicable detour, 45 minutes to Camberwell, just to withdraw $50 from an ATM. Investigators never figured out why. Did she meet someone? Was she running from someone? Or was her thinking already clouded by fear? As she finally began her long drive, Ziggy curled up beside her. Marcia was spotted one last time. Just before midnight, a truck driver saw her walking along the dark stretch of the Prince's Highway. She looked distressed, lost, afraid. He offered help. She refused, saying only, "Leave me alone." This would be the final confirmed sighting of Marcia and Ryan. Hours later, around 2:48 a.m., police found Marcia's car pulled over at a dangerous bend in the road. Cliffs on both sides, no safe shoulder, and no sign of Marcia or Ziggy. 3 days passed before her family realized she had never arrived. By then, there were already 15 messages on her answering machine, one from police, another from a stranger who found her wallet scattered for 300 meters along the highway, as if thrown out of a moving vehicle. Nothing inside had been stolen. Even stranger, Marcia hadn't packed a thing. Her toothbrush, clothing, and essentials were still at home, untouched. Whatever made her leave, she left in a hurry. And when her brother went to collect the car, police couldn't locate the keys, despite earlier saying they had them. Instead, they handed him a coat hanger to open the door. What followed was one of the largest and most confusing multi-state searches in Australia at the time. Volunteers, SES members, helicopters, cadaver dogs, every resource was deployed. Sightings poured in. Some claimed she was seen walking alone. Others insisted she was with two unidentified men. None were ever confirmed. No trace of her clothing. No remains. Not even Ziggy, who experts believe would have survived long enough to be found. It was as if both of them simply disappeared. For her family, the disappearance was more than an unsolved case. It was the unraveling of someone they thought they understood. Marcia had survived hardship before. She battled substance dependency in her 20s. She recovered from a terrifying episode of drug-induced psychosis. She rebuilt her life piece by piece, with strength, discipline, and hope. That's why her sudden shift in behavior, the fear, the paranoia, the frantic escape, felt so tragic, so out of character, and so deeply unsettling. Whatever happened on that lonely highway in Yarragon, whatever terrified Marcia enough to flee her home that night, remains a mystery buried in the darkness. But one fact is undeniable. People do not simply vanish with their dog, leaving their life behind as if it evaporated into thin air. Someone knows something. Somewhere along that deserted stretch of road, the truth still waits. And until it's found, the case of Marcia and Ryan will remain one of Australia's most chilling unresolved cold cases. The disappearance of Erin Marie Gilbert. Not everyone who gets lost is ever found. And for 24-year-old Erin, that haunting truth became her reality on the night of July 1st, 1995. Erin was young, ambitious, and full of life. She stood 5'5", weighed around 145 pounds, with warm brown hair and hazel eyes. To those who knew her, she was thoughtful and kind, a woman with her whole life ahead of her. But one summer evening in Girdwood, Alaska, that life would vanish into the dark, leaving behind one of the state's most unsettling mysteries. Erin had grown up in San Francisco, living with her father before moving north to Alaska to stay with her sister, Stephanie, and her husband. She'd been living with them for about a year by the time she disappeared, helping with their kids and trying to start fresh. That July evening, Erin was heading out on a first date. The man's name was David Combs, someone she'd met just a few nights earlier at a local bar. When David arrived to pick her up, Stephanie noticed something odd. He was wearing sunglasses at night. A small detail, maybe, but one that would stick in her mind forever. Before Erin left, Stephanie's 4-year-old son tugged on her hand and told her, "Aunt Erin, you should take a cell phone." Erin just smiled and said she'd be fine. Those would be the last words her family ever heard from her. The couple drove an hour south to the Girdwood Forest Fair, a lively summer festival filled with food, music, and laughter. Witnesses later confirmed seeing them at the fair's beer garden, chatting and drinking together until around 6 p.m. But after that, Erin's story becomes a tangle of questions, and one man's version of events. David told police that when they returned to his car, it wouldn't start. So, he claimed he left Erin with the vehicle while he walked off to find help, a friend's house somewhere nearby. He said he walked for 2 hours through the woods, but never found the house. When he came back, Erin was gone. According to David, he assumed she'd walked back to the fair on her own. He started the car, which suddenly worked, and began driving around, looking for her. He claimed he searched until about 1 a.m., but found no trace. Then, instead of calling her family or the police, he waited until 7 the next morning before phoning Stephanie. When Stephanie got the call, panic immediately set in. She rushed to check Erin's room, but her bed was empty, untouched. There was no sign she'd ever made it home. Stephanie contacted authorities, and the search began. Police combed the fairgrounds, surrounding trails, and wooded areas. Volunteers joined in. Helicopters circled overhead. But no one, not a single witness, saw Erin after she left the beer garden with David. No purse, no footprints, no evidence. It was as though Erin Marie Gilbert had simply vanished into thin air. When questioned again, David's story never changed. But investigators and Erin's family have never been convinced. There were too many red flags. Too many unanswered questions. Why did he leave her alone with a broken-down car, in the middle of the forest? Why wait nearly 8 hours before calling for help? And why did the car suddenly start working when he came back? Even stranger, he led police back to the area where he claimed to have parked, but he couldn't remember the exact spot. The car was never located there, and no one else had seen it that night. Decades have passed since that summer evening in 1995. The forest where Erin vanished has changed, but her family's pain has not. Each year, they return to Girdwood, leaving flowers and hoping that maybe, just maybe, someone will finally speak up. Erin's sister once said, "We don't believe she's alive anymore, but we still need to know what happened. We just want to bring her home." To this day, no new evidence has surfaced. No remains have been found, and no one has ever been charged in connection with her disappearance. It's been almost 30 years since Erin walked into those woods. And while time may have faded the headlines, her story still lingers. A quiet echo of the danger that can hide behind a single, ordinary night. Because somewhere in the shadows of Alaska's wilderness, someone knows what happened to Erin Marie Gilbert. If you have any information about her disappearance, please contact the Anchorage Police Department or the Alaska State Troopers. Until the truth is found, Erin's story remains one of Alaska's coldest and most haunting mysteries. Jennifer Louise Bell had always been a fighter. Her life hadn't been easy. She'd stumbled, she'd struggled. But by 2023, the 36-year-old mother of 3 was finally getting back on her feet. Her kids were her reason for everything, the anchor that kept her steady. Friends said she was focused, full of determination, and ready to start over. But in the summer of 2023, that comeback story ended in silence. Because Jennifer Bell didn't just go missing. She vanished into thin air. It was sometime in July when Jennifer was seen waiting at a Shell gas station on Dickerson Pike in Nashville. She'd called her mother to meet her there. She needed money for gas. The SUV she was driving wasn't hers. It belonged to her on-again, off-again boyfriend, Jacob McCord. Her mother arrived, handed over the money, and watched Jennifer drive away. No one realized that would be the last confirmed sighting of her alive. At first, the family wasn't alarmed. Jennifer had gone off the radar before, living a complicated life that sometimes meant disappearing for a few days. But then came a phone call, one that changed everything. Near the end of July, McCord called Jennifer's family from Lee County, Alabama, with a story that didn't make sense. He claimed he'd woken up to find Jennifer gone, along with his phone, his wallet, and his SUV. He said she'd stolen everything and vanished into the night. Only days later, the vehicle was found abandoned in a rural area off Lee Road 179, and the sight of it sent chills through everyone who saw it. The passenger window was smashed out. The driver's side mirror was missing. There was no sign of Jennifer. At first, police involvement was minimal. Because of Jennifer's lifestyle and past disappearances, the case didn't raise alarms. But by February 2, 2024, her family had seen enough red flags. That's when she was officially reported missing to the Nashville Police Department 7 months after she'd last been seen. And when investigators finally dug into her disappearance, what they found was troubling. Jennifer's cousin, Carla Sullivan, came forward with new information. She said that in July 2023, around the time Jennifer disappeared, the two of them had driven together to meet McCord. Jennifer had been staying with Carla after a fight with him days earlier. But on that day, she said they'd made up. Jennifer got into his black SUV, waved goodbye, and drove off with him. That was the last time Carla saw her cousin. Days later, that same SUV, the one McCord claimed Jennifer had stolen, turned up abandoned in Alabama. Then came a disturbing witness statement. Someone reported seeing McCord camping alone near Mill Creek, washing clothes in the water. He told others he'd been in Lee County with Jennifer. But now, she and the vehicle were both gone. McCord quickly became a person of interest in Jennifer's disappearance. But when investigators questioned him, he offered little help. His story shifted. His cooperation evaporated. and suspicion only grew stronger. By April 2024, McCord was arrested on unrelated charges, caught in a stolen truck after running from Nashville police. Even behind bars, he's refused to say anything meaningful about what happened to Jennifer. Now, in 2025, more than a year after she vanished, Jennifer Louise Bell remains missing. Her family has never stopped searching, never stopped asking what really happened in that window of time between that gas station meeting and the discovery of the SUV. Did something go wrong between her and McCord that night? Did she leave on her own? Or was she silenced before she had the chance? There are more questions than answers. But one thing is certain, someone knows the truth. If you have any information about the disappearance of Jennifer Bell, contact Nashville Crime Stoppers at 615-742-7463. The disappearance of Danielle Imbo and Richard Petrone Jr. It was the evening of February 19, 2005. Two friends, 34-year-old Danielle Imbo and 35-year-old Richard Petrone Jr., decided at the last minute to spend the night out together. They had dated once before but hadn't seen each other in quite some time. Life had thrown them both some challenges recently, and this night was meant to be nothing more than a friendly catch-up. They met up with friends at a popular bar on South Street in Philadelphia. The mood was light, the music was good, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Shortly before midnight, Richard and Danielle left together in Richard's black Dodge Dakota. That moment would be the last confirmed sighting of either of them. The next day, alarm bells began to ring. Danielle missed a hair appointment, and calls to both her and Richard's phones went straight to voicemail. Her brother, John, let himself into her home with a spare key. Everything inside looked perfectly normal. No signs of a struggle, no indication that she had suddenly left. By mid-afternoon, it was clear something was wrong. Danielle hadn't returned home to pick up her young son, Joe Jr., from his father. For both Danielle and Richard, disappearing without a word was completely out of character. That's when the families contacted the police. The search began almost immediately. That night, John and Richard's father drove through the streets between Philadelphia and Mount Laurel, checking highways, side streets, and even waterways. They scanned the major bridges, hoping to spot Richard's truck. Nothing. By the next day, friends and volunteers joined in. They searched within a 100-mile radius, handed out flyers with pictures of Richard's truck, and even hired a helicopter to scan from above. But despite all the effort, there was no trace. Not of the couple, not of the vehicle. Over the months and years that followed, investigators explored every possible lead. Eventually, the FBI suggested that this could have been a targeted act, something planned in advance. But with no physical evidence, the case stalled. For those who knew them, Danielle was remembered as a warm, outgoing woman who loved music, books, and, above all, her young son. Richard was easygoing, a devoted father to his teenage daughter, and someone who worked hard at his family's bakery. They had both been through difficult times, and their night out had seemed like a simple return to good company and familiar faces. Instead, it became the start of one of the most baffling unsolved cases in the region. To this day, their families live with unanswered questions and the heavy weight of not knowing. They hold on to hope that, one day, someone will come forward with a piece of information that brings closure to a night that began with music and laughter, but ended in silence.